40%. So if you could take 15% out of that 40%, I mean, that's real money to a vehicle cost.
Yeah. I would guess that this story on the opportunity we could have to collaborate has existed before, and not software, other aspects of the vehicle. Do you think it's realistic? Do you think eventually we get forced down that road?
Well, I think that is what's, left to our own devices, and there's also antitrust and all kinds of things that have to be managed in that. But and there may be a role for government. Not in charge of it. Let's be clear, but they may have to clear the way, because I think this existential threat, the competition is doing it, and they're going to get the benefits of it. And so if you elect not to do it too, we could be in trouble. So I think that could kick it in, but it's going to take some kind of centralizing body that manages it. I don't think any one OEM can manage it for the others. Maybe there's a tech player that's involved. Some of the big tech players. I don't want to name names, but I think that's how it comes together. I would love to work on a commission that puts a collaboration like this together for the broader industry. I think it'd be very valuable.
Yeah, for sure. Just tying to this point on, in particular, the domestic Chinese at CES, there was nothing new, but if you were there at CES, that was where all the foot traffic was the booths of, a couple of Chinese OEMs that showed up and shocked everyone with the quality's here. The technology obviously is here, and touching it.
Well, the fact they're at CES, I think
with everything else happening around.
In more force than some of the North American, it is very telling. They're knocking on the door.
For sure.
Big opportunity there.
Yeah. You mentioned before, when we were talking about some of the challenges that some of the startups or smaller companies or leaner companies are doing things well. I wanted to talk a little bit about how much of this challenge is develop, deploy, maintain an SDV, like technical problems versus organizational problems.
Well, I may repeat a little bit, but that's a great question. I like it, because, what they want to do, Tesla's done it, right? Tesla's, for the most part, done SDV. I think they did it, the Model S came out in 2012, and I think the first OTA was 2014. So it's not new. That's been around. So what we want it to look like is known. So takes some of the technical challenge away, because it's not like you're inventing it.
Sure.
However, if you're trying to deliver that, do you know what good looks like in your tools and processes and people to get there, if that makes sense, right? So it's a lot of organization and people, clearly. Nothing happens without people and good people. But I come back to what I said before. If you got the right leadership and a really clear vision, and you're able to make rapid decisions, that's where some people get hung up. And these startups, I think, made very rapid decisions, and the risk was lower, right? They didn't have a car park or a brand name to worry about. They wanted to innovate. They wanted to go fast. So I think that's really the crux of it, and it can be done. But my recommendation to some of the large OEMs is maybe this standalone team kind of sent off to develop the architecture that you then migrate to. Because if you try to evolve it from what you have, the runway gets very long. The management of the technical debt and all the different vehicle demands become debilitating. They become paralyzing.
Totally.
Again, and then come back to the VW. VW's worked on this. They even have a division for this purpose, but yet Rivian's got vehicles on the road doing it. Now Rivian sells tens of thousands of vehicles, and VW sells millions and millions and millions of vehicles. Maybe up close to 10 million. So two very different worlds. But it is solvable but you got to stick to it. And you got to have the elements I talked about.
For sure. I think one thing we've seen even change over the last maybe 6 years or so is how future forward you're looking with the platforms you're launching. There's so much more of the conversation of the OEM being involved in the vehicle's life cycle beyond traditional service parts and those things. We have examples of OEMs that have 5 different generations of TCUs on the road, and it becomes the tech debt is so high on generation 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
And I know a few years ago we start to hear more announcements of OEMs like Ford. We're going to connect everything. We're going to connect all the vehicles in South America. The ROI isn't quite there yet, but we know from a cost savings perspective that this is going to be better than what we're dealing with right now with 10 different generations of connectivity platforms. So I think it's an interesting angle to think too about just how far you're looking, whether it's return on investment or cost, whatever that equation is. We're more looking at 6, 8, maybe 10 years as opposed to it's sent to my dealer and then we've got an opportunity post warranty at service.
Absolutely. I mean the whole model of the platform, we used to launch platforms, do minor freshening, major freshening, new platform, and that was the life cycle. But we didn't touch the product really other than those launch events, right? So with SDV in the new world, you're updating, modifying, offering new features to vehicles all the time. And that's a revenue opportunity as well. So it's the razor and the razor blades, right? You can sell the razor and keep selling them. But that gets a very tricky space because, Tesla, again, I hate to keep mentioning it, they've sold some features for pretty good revenue in the life cycle of the vehicle. I drove up here from down south for this event in my F-150, which has Blue Cruise. And a few months ago, I got a notice that says, hey, your Blue Cruise has expired and you need to update Blue Cruise. And I was, a little upset thinking, well, I should have that. Well, in the end, I only had to go to the Ford Pass app, use my points to continue Blue Cruise. Okay, so they didn't get revenue out of it, but what did they get? They started training me as the customer that some of these features going forward have to be subscribed to, one, and they got me on their app and using it and looking at the fact that I had earned points, which I didn't realize I had. Now I'm sure they'd like hard revenue, and it will have to be a feature that the customer, in fact, we were reading an article, I think BMW, believe it or not, was trying to charge for heated seats. That's not gonna work, okay? It's gotta be a feature that the customer truly believes is beyond what I should normally get. And what I normally get is gonna change as time goes by, right? But let's take an example like high resolution audio. I got to work with the great Neil Young at one time in my career, and his passion was high resolution audio, and how you could get the true intent, the original intent of the artist's voice. And he was very upset that we listen to music on our iPhones because it ruins the music.
Right.
So anyway, I make a little joke, but if you offered something like to audiophiles, and you said, hey, and you want to charge, I don't know, $4.99 a month, and you get high res and your friends don't, that could be something that in the life cycle of the vehicle you could charge for.
Sure.
Yeah?
I wanted to mention we do have time for questions. There's a microphone back there, so if you have a question, please feel free to jump back there. I do want to touch on this revenue point because I do feel like most of our time here has been more on the pitfall versus the opportunity side, so let's keep going on this. And yeah, BMW got more than their fair share of headlines for the heated seat, debacle as it were. But even things like charging for CarPlay and other things like that came to market and came back. It's interesting. It's kind of a double-edged sword. We do a lot of consumer research on this, and it's always the same thing. It's these unique. It doesn't necessarily have to be a driving experience, but a unique vehicle experience is where there's some value, right? At the same time, I think we can give credit to someone like a BMW that has the capability to put something in market, take it out of market. Maybe it's adjusting prices or adjusting that offering, and that really underscores the power of this sort of digital ecosystem that you build. We're not talking about the minor refresh window, right? We're talking kind of getting some live response. Did Scott go into the Ford Pass app, or did he just stop using Blue Cruise? That's really powerful. And then we start to see things, especially with these L2 Plus, with these highway hands-off, the margins are really high. Ford has talked about this. Tesla, this is certainly being reflected in stock price, like 70+% margin. If you work in automotive, that's not margin you find anywhere else.
That's for sure.
So we're still, relatively low number of people that are paying for them because they're coming off trial and they're still on the Ford Pass app. We haven't gone over to the price conversion yet, so it's still an open question, but the early return is pretty attractive. Maybe we could talk a little bit more about that ROI. So of all of this headache that we need to adapt, we've talked a little bit about maybe some recall avoidance or at least saving on the warranty side. There's some direct revenue opportunity. Anything else come to mind in terms of like, this is why this road is worth driving down?
A bunch of things come to mind. Firstly, I think we should say that there are far more opportunities and benefits to the SDV journey than there are pitfalls.
Okay.
There are always pitfalls, but think about, we talk, and I'll come back to revenue in a second.
Yeah.
But think about, if you've worked in an OEM, and myself and my colleagues have, when there's a field quality issue, you have to divert a ton of resource to fix that. You have to fix it now, right? Your customers are, have a problem. And what does that do? That diverts that resource from generating new revenue generating products that it could be working on. So even though that's not revenue kind of in your pocket, if you will, if the amount, think about it, the 12 million vehicles that had software-related recalls, they all needed some work from some software teams to fix, somewhere along the line, and maybe a lot of work. And that's work they're not doing on getting out new features, maybe revenue generating, maybe they're just customer satisfaction features.
Sure.
I don't know, but customer satisfaction, converts to brand satisfaction, which converts to pricing, right? So it's all one big happy family there. The other thing is, the OEMs need to work on features that can benefit multiple vehicle lines.
Yeah.
Because I used to harass some of my software teams when I was in the OEM space with things I wanted, right? And I understood why I wanted them, and I had good reasons. But what you don't want to let that do is sub-optimize how you're designing the total platform and that architecture I talked about.
Yeah.
That's the priority, getting that right. Then you can build above the API layer, you can build all kinds of neat stuff for your internal customers who, and then in turn, will deliver to the external customers.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And we have some additional, I think, really interesting implementations of cost savings, not just the recall warranty route, but also looking at usage of features. And if you're putting a bunch of time and development and support for features, the usage is very low. Well, maybe we take this out of the car next generation. So again, it's not a sexy thing to go out in front of your customers and say, we removed this because you didn't use it. But from from an R&D spend perspective, that makes a difference.
You bring that up. We worked on a project exactly was that, which was a lot of work. Now, you'd like to know the feature wouldn't get used before you built the feature.
That's ideal, yeah.
But at least you can, because you can see how many, a lot of the executives in our company came out of Microsoft. And Microsoft sends Windows out to a beta group. And they actually can measure keystrokes and see what features people use. Automotive OEMs can say, did you use your self-parking feature? Okay, we have it in there. It's X amount of variable cost. And X many people didn't use it.
Right.
Now, maybe what you learn is that in certain geographic areas, I'll give you another great example. I worked on a system one time called Auto Air Refresh, which was for the Chinese market. One of the things that, just like you might check the temperature or I don't know, when your team's playing next on your phone in the morning, the Chinese wake up and check air quality. It's that important. It's front of mind. Because can the kids go outside? Can I do my run inside, or do I got to do it on the treadmill? So a feature that measures and cleans air inside the vehicle is very highly sought after in a market like that. An area where you could, through software, you could activate, or you'd have, some hardware obviously would have to be included in the filtration and stuff like that. But you can access publicly available data to know what air quality is today, and then you can give the customer advice on what systems to run and what to do.
Yeah.
It's really far-reaching. If you build the product correctly, all the things you can do, and all the elements of the customer's life you can touch. Yeah. Right? We haven't even started talking about the mobility society. Maybe that's our next meeting. But how does the vehicle then interact with the city? How does it interact with your home?
Sure.
That's a whole nother kettle of fish, which is very fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. Another point, we worked on a project a while ago about the dealer network experience. And this is critical, not only traditional of where do we put our dealers and how do they service these vehicles, but in terms of one of the more inefficient aspects of the industry when you're selling a vehicle is the inventory management. What percentage of vehicles has this headlight package and the sunroof, and going to a dealer lot and finding that vehicle that you wanted is not there. Like, this is a big inefficiency. So BMW, they more than their fair share of bad press for the heated seats. But the intent was, hey, we're equipping 90% of our vehicles with heated seats. What if we just equipped 100% of them and had a better implementation than what they did was, let's have the dealer control that. So if somebody wants it or doesn't want it, they can turn it on, get some efficiency with their assembly process, and maybe drive supplier price down on the heated seat component. Again, not everything needs to be sort of customer interface. Do I turn this on? Do I have a subscription to heated seats? But you can see how in other examples, we've seen this with headlights and adaptive LED headlights. Again, the opportunity to just simplify kind of the BOM makeup of a vehicle and then give the dealer a little bit of control of what gets turned on and turned off. This is, these are conversations. One of the big complications about this is think about how many departments need to be involved for that math to work for the company. It makes sense. It's really easy to have this conversation, but that's not how large global OEMs are set up. We've got department A, B, C with different metrics and ROI that they need to hit. So this is always kind of comes back to this point when we talk about like startups and not having not only tech debt, but the sort of organizational debt and the department, goals that maybe could conflict at the corporate level, right?
Yeah. I mean, you said a mouthful there.
Yeah.
But I think I would summarize and say complexity hurts almost on all fronts, right?
Yeah.
There's good complexity. Don't get me wrong. We can't make the Model T again, but there's complexity in the organization. There's complexity in the product offerings, and this strategy of enabling dealer installment to push things to the dealer, that can get dangerous for you. But done correctly, it has some benefits. But I also think from coming back to SDV and warranty for a second, we're even working with a company right now. I won't say who it is, but they're not automotive. They make lawnmowers, commercial lawnmowers, and snow blowers and equipment like that. And like I said, the journey at the very beginning, this whole journey for all products, recreational vehicles, home appliances, they're all making this software journey, and they're learning how to manage and leverage the software in their products to reduce warranties. So just like you mentioned, hey, if feature's not being used, we can why offer something that they obviously don't care about if they don't use it.
Yeah.
So why would we put the variable cost in? There's also ways to use SDV to preempt quality issues. So let's just say you can sense that a clutch in a transmission is slipping above specification. Vehicle's got, 80,000 miles on it. We've picked up this diagnostic. So instead of, bringing the customer in, maybe you have a software code that can put some weight on some other clutches or change how that clutch is engaged to relieve that wear, right? So there's something that happens, the customer doesn't know about it, you save the customer from being stranded,
right.
And then obviously if it gets to a certain point, the customer never gets stranded, says, okay, this clutch is worn to the point, we're not gonna fix it with another tweak, we gotta bring him in.
Sure.
He doesn't like that, but he likes that better than being left on the side I-75.
Yeah.
I can promise you that.
No, it makes sense.
Right?
I don't remember who the OEM is, but I remember reading about an example of a speech recognition system, and they were able to monitor kind of the data to see where there was a stop in the engagement, and then realize that this is an issue of certain terminology that's being used that's not being recorded. So it's not a stop because we did what the customer needed and we accomplished the task. It's something we need to fix to continue down further, menu trees or whatever the case may be. So yeah, there's a potential opportunity for paralysis of all of that data coming through and what exactly do you do with it. We saw this with, a few years ago, data monetization was sort of a buzzword. This data is going to be worth X trillion dollars, what do we do with it? And yeah, I think essentially as an industry, what we learned is it's about the use case. It's less about, the kind of raw data feed coming through. Same goes for, I think, internal use case at an OEM of where you can find that value, right?
You remind me, our chief technical officer for Envorso is a guy named Ludo Haudik, and his prior job was vice president of AI for Meta.
Okay.
So he came from Meta and joined us, and as he observe the industry, and as I said in the beginning, we've kind of combined tech industry people with automotive and other industrial strength people. But his comment to me was, he said, Scott, yeah, the automotive guys, they're interested in data. He said, but in big tech, it's a religion. It's what we all exist for. They are so focused on data, and it's data that lets us know our customer better than our customer knows themselves. And you've all experienced it, right? You all get those ads that come up tailored to you, and all the different things they're using the data for. But this is a space where I think that we can. I think we feel like we're doing a lot with it, but I think there's 10 times more we can do. But like you said, the quantity of data is so huge. If you don't have smart systems to manage that, to analyze it, to translate it into actionable things, then it isn't going to do you any good. It's just a cloud full of data. It's a cost. Yes, exactly.
Sure.
So I think that's a skill that needs to be continually grown in the industry as well. Yeah. And I think that the big tech teams can help with that as well. So.
I think it's a good lead into something you mentioned earlier, and maybe how we can wrap up here, but one of the themes of the Mobility Global Forum is around talent. So maybe we could talk to that directly. This is really complicated because we have this kind of general sentiment that it's hard to recruit from tech or it's hard to retain from tech, one of the two. But also in automotive, certainly not sparing software engineers. 2024 saw a lot of layoffs at different OEMs where full departments in some cases were let go. So I'm curious your perspective, both as kind of industry observer and expert, but also leading an organization working with these automotive companies. How do you view the talent issue? Like what's at the core of this?
Well, we probably don't have time for that whole thing, but I think here's an interesting thing I've learned, from having a career in automotive and then a long career in software, is this concept of a 10x developer. In the old hardware world, if I got one engineer, I can do one thing. If I got 10 engineers, I can do 10 things, right? In the software world, there's these 10x guys, and Ludo would talk about this as well. These are developers that can just they can work. Their productivity can be 10x of other average developers, and so if you can get a handful of them kind of leading your broader team. Not leading through management meetings. I mean, leading through code, writing code reviews, doing it, not talking about it, doing it. I think that's a secret. So yeah, there's a lot out there, but where are those diamonds in the rough that you can get? So I think having a system that identifies those people and then leverages them and empowers them to be proactive and deliver on their own without permission or waiting for a decision. That's where the power's at in the talent space.
Interesting. All right, there's a lot more we get into there, but I think that's where we're gonna leave it for the sake of time. Appreciate you guys joining virtually or here in person. Appreciate the time, Scott.
Thank you.
Really insightful conversation. Shameless plug: S&P has tours going on of the show floor. If you're interested, we have an opening. I don't know, top of the hour, I think, right around the corner. You'll see our booth. So if you want to get a little bit more insight about what you see on the show floor, be happy to talk to you there.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Thanks for the time, guys.